evening, everyone. Council has returned from closed session. I'd like to ask the Mr. City Attorney to please report out on the items.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. On item A, no reportable action was taken, and on item B, also no reportable action was taken. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. So after Councilmember Yu returns, we will begin our regular meeting. Thank you. All right, good evening. I'd like to call the regular City Council meeting of December 4th, 2018 to order. May we have the roll call, please?
Councilmember Chavez.
Here.
Councilmember Sternquist. Here. Councilmember Yu.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Fish.
Here.
Mayor Mann.
Here. Tonight, we are pleased to have Pastor Jim Walden from First Baptist Church of Temple City to provide our invocation. Their children's Christmas presentation, titled The Christmas Dream Team Parade, is Sunday, December 8th at 9 a.m. and 11 a.m. Their adults will present their Christmas presentation on Sunday, December 16th, also at 9 a.m. and 11 a.m. First Baptist Church's Christmas Eve service is at 4 p.m. on Christmas Eve, and everyone is invited. Everyone please rise for the invocation, and please remain standing afterwards for the Pledge of Allegiance by Boy Scout Troop 174.
Let's pray. Father, I love this town. I appreciate this council. You have blessed us, I think, with one of the best cities in this state. And we thank you as we come off the time of Thanksgiving, celebrating what you've done for us. And as we head towards Christmas and New Year's, you continue to show your goodness. Thank you for your protection. And we ask for continued wisdom and guidance for the city, for our leaders, that you would bless them, our first responders. Thank you for being so good to us in this season of joy and the peace that you brought to all people. In Jesus' name, we all say, Amen.
Thank you, Pastor Walden. Next, we have Boy Scout Troop 174. The caller of the flag ceremony will be Noah Ogata, Nicholas Costello, Casey Kim, Jaden Lee, Andrew Sui, Joshua Chen, Austin Tuan, and Jordan Mendoza. Troop 174 celebrated the Pearl Harbor Day 1 week early this past Saturday by visiting Plains of Fame Air Museum in Chino. The Scouts had the opportunity to attend a living history presentation and learn about historical airplanes. The troop will have its annual Christmas party, also known as Bunko Night, this coming Thursday, December 6th. The event will start at 7:30. Everyone is welcome. Troop 174 meets every Thursday from 7:30 to 9 at Westminster Presbyterian Church near the corner of Temple City Boulevard and Live Oak Avenue. The troop is a backpacking, backcountry camping troop, and boys who are interested in backpacking and backcountry camping are welcome to come check us out. Troop 174.
Detail, forward march. Detail, halt. Post. Those not in uniform, place your right hand over your heart. Scout salute. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Two.
Detail reform. Detail about face. Detail forward march.
Thank you. Thank you, Troop 174. Next, we have certificates that we'd like to present to the winners of the Temple City Library's annual bookmark contest. Trying to see if we have, oh yes. Hi, so we have Miss Jin Lee from Temple City Library, who's the manager of Temple City Library. Miss Jin Lee will give us a brief summary of the program, and afterwards, I'd like to invite council to present certificates to all the winners.
Good evening, Mayor and City Council. My name is Jinli. I came from the Temple City Library. I'm very proud to present the winner of the 39th annual bookmark contest. The LA County Library hosts the bookmark contest every year, and to challenge parents, educators, and librarians to introduce children to great read and foster the love of reading and the library. The love of books and reading has served as a source of inspiration for our contest participants, who have shared their thoughts and feelings through their bookmark design. With a love for books and reading has become a respect for and understanding of the needs for reading in our lives. Those children have discovered the Temple City Library is a place where they can improve their literature skills and where they can find information. Students can find books and other library materials which help them with their homework assignments, answer questions about their world, and let them imagination fly. So all this winner was selected from, we received over 70 bookmark entrants. So all this entrants is on display right now in the library. So I encourage the city council and the public come to the library and to appreciate the artwork. We're going to display until the end of December. And tonight, we invite you to honor these contest winners, not only for their artistic skills and creativity, but also for their appreciation of books and reading. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Jin Lee. And so I'd like to invite council to help me present the certificates to all of our winners tonight. All right, first off, the winner of the kindergarten to second grade category, Emily Lee. Honorable mention for the kindergarten to second grade category, Ellie Zhang. Honorable mention for kindergarten second grade category, Zhe Yun Chin. Winner of the third to fifth grade category, Abigail Zhao. Honorable mention, third to fifth grade category, Erin Su. Honorable mention, third to fifth grade category, Arissa Su. Winner of the sixth to eighth grade category, Carissa Zhang. Honorable mention for the 6th to 8th grade category, Christy Peng. Honorable mention for the 6th to 8th grade category, Jarrett Navarrete. Winner of the 9th to 12th grade category, Jacob Gong. Honorable mention for the 9th to 12th grade category, Sarah Yang. Honorable mention for the 9th to 12th grade category, Amanda Huang. All right, congratulations. So we'll get a picture up here with everyone. If only we could do those types of ceremonial presentations every meeting.
Every, they're so cute.
And thank you for all the parents for being here. It's all right. Next up, we have public comments on items not listed on the agenda, and I do have a number of items here. First, I'd like to call up Ms. Helen Shaw.
So, good evening.
Good evening.
Mayor, City Council, City Manager, and City staff. I see they only have a few minutes, so I better talk fast. So I'll just refer to my notes. I am Helen Romero Shaw. I'm representing Southern California Gas Company tonight. And the reason I'm here is there's an issue that's of importance to the gas company. And I want the citizens of Temple City to be aware that of this issue. First of all, the gas company has been bringing natural gas for 150 years to homes and to warm their homes, and they're using it now. And also, the businesses here in the city use natural gas for various applications. There is a push at the state level to only have electricity as the energy choice. And of course, the gas company is very opposed to this because we feel that the customer should have a choice. So if they want to have an all-electric home, that's fine. But if a customer wants to have natural gas to use so that they can cook and keep their homes warm, then they should have natural gas available. And in addition to choice, there's also the cost factor involved. Electricity costs more. Even to buy an all-electric home, it's close to $8,000 more. And then not to mention the bills that are close to $400 more a month than if you were just to use natural gas. So what is the gas company doing about this? We're working on getting renewable natural gas, and that's getting natural gas from other sources than fossil fuel. That's coming from the dairies, from waste, capturing it, cleaning it, and put it into our pipelines that are already there. And if we were able to do this, even the survey that we took, and actually we had the scientists look at this, that if we could put just 16% of natural gas that we deliver to our customer, if it would come from renewable sources, that would have the same effect on reducing greenhouse gas emission as electrifying all of California. And it would be at a much lower cost. So, and we feel this is a realistic goal that we can reach by 2030. So this is why I came tonight, just to bring this matter to your attention. Good news, the California Public Utilities Commission has approved our using renewable natural gas at our company-owned refueling stations. So we're putting renewable natural gas already into transit vehicles and passenger vehicles. So I'm going to end by letting you know that I'll be sending information to the city manager with more details, and I'm requesting that he share that information with the city council. And if you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer them. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you,
And
Helen.
happy holidays.
Happy holidays to you, too. All right, next I'd like to call Mr. Steve Stafford.
Mayor Mann, Mayor Pro Tempore Fish, council members. I was recently on, last Wednesday, went to the Planning Commission meeting over in El Monte about that medicinal marijuana manufacturer. I went by there yesterday because I realized this, Ellis and Temple City split like this. There's an island there, and there's no way those trucks are going to be able to make a right turn out of there, let alone a left turn. And when you go up to Laura Zusa, there's a concrete median there to keep people from making turns there because of Home Depot. So at some point in juncture, they're going to have to do some traffic improvements to even make this work, quite possibly a signal at Ellis and Temple City, Ellis and Laura Zusa. I do know this because I have some documents from the city of El Monte on Crown City plating and the soil around it. It's very contaminated. There's probably at least 10 or 15 hazardous chemicals that they dumped in the ground since the 50s. They closed there, I believe, in '93. The soil is very toxic, very unsafe. They were allowed Amazon across the tracks to put vans there, and quite frankly, Department of Toxics don't really agree with it. They let it fly, but somebody gets sickened in there, the people that own that property are going to be liable. You know, they have to remediate the soil all around before anybody should even be in that area. There was a water guy here. I think some of you guys remember he had a map showing where all the contamination was. At one time they thought it was at Live Oak, and now it's at Huntington. Well, I can tell you that not only was the soil bad, but the air was. I used to get sick all the time. And I had to stay away from school a couple days because I was having problems breathing. I was diagnosed few years after they closed with bronchitis and asthma. That is from the chemicals they were putting in the air. There are a lot of people that have that around there. This place, I know, dumped gasoline. I caught them doing it and called the fire department in '82. And they dumped a lot of gasoline. They dumped it into the sewer. And people, when they flushed their toilet, they'd have an odor of gas. They evacuated the fire department, had about 75 firemen there with 3 hazmats and as much equipment as they could get in there to get the houses decontaminated from what they dumped. You know, we really, at this point, Department of Toxics are going to start doing tests. They did a test on Roland and Valley. I saw them doing it. And I approached the guys and talked to them. They said the soil's contaminated here. Union Pacific, when they did the underpass, the soil was contaminated there. It took them 5 years to finish it because of the contamination they had to remove. There's a lot of stuff going on here that El Monte didn't cover. And just so you know, on December 18th, they're having a public hearing. The council is to whether to approve this or deny it. I saw some very shaky things at the Planning Commission that bothered me. They took a 1-minute break and then came back and made the decision. And I saw flowers arrive on where some of the council members or the Planning Commission members sit. It amazed me. I don't think this was done right at all. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Stafford. Next, I'd like to call Miss Lucy Liu.
Good evening, Mayor, fellow council members, city manager, fellow city staff. I have two very separate issues. I just want to make that clear. These are very, very separate issues. First of all, I want to bring this to everybody's attention. We have a blood drive at the library just across the way on December 17th, Monday, from 1 p.m. to 7 p.m. So this can accommodate anybody who works in the area or who can hopefully get home before the blood drive ends. So please, if you haven't made the appointment, I will leave some flyers in the back there. You can go online to Red Cross Blood, search our zip code, and be able to make an appointment as well. We're collecting regular blood, and we're also collecting Power Red. Power Red is for people who are type O, A negative, or B negative donors. Unfortunately, you have to meet a certain height and weight requirement combination to be able to do that, but it just extracts your red blood cell. So that's almost as good as 2 blood donations. So we hope that if you meet the criteria, to please consider doing a Power Red. Yes, ma'am.
Is that O negative?
O, all O, and A negative or B negative. Because these are, I guess, O is obviously universal, and A negative and B negative are kind of rarer bloods. Yeah. So if you're either O, either positive, negative, or A negative, B negative, please consider doing the Power Red. And everybody is welcome to do just the blood donation. So hopefully we'll see you there. And the second issue is very, very separate. So forget I said that earlier, and then because I don't want people to think that the Red Cross is also involved in this for whatever way it's not. It's me speaking as a resident. I was also at the Planning Commission meeting for the City of El Monte on November 27th, I believe. They actually have a meeting tonight. The process is very long. It seems like the applicant covered every point you can think of, but it's very concerning because at that time, at that evening, they had 11 applicants, 9 of which passed the vetting process, the initial vetting process. The addresses of those 11 locations, the majority border our city with El Monte. And as of tonight, a fellow Temple City resident went to their planning department and found out they now have 20 applications. So there is an article online in the Chinese group that is equating if this happens, if one goes through, obviously more are going to go through. Us being the neighbor, we're probably going to suffer some consequences. What? I don't know yet. Safety is a main concern because this is an all-cash business. So, and I hate to say this, but I think it's a known fact. El Monte is a gang-infested town. Word will get out. Most of this information is public record. If they think that they don't advertise, will keep the criminal factor out, that's wishful thinking. But it's very concerning that they now have 20 applications. Even having one get approved is concerning, let alone 20. So I hope our city will be able to do something. I know our city did send them a letter, but I'm really praying that more can be done. Thank you.
Thank you, Lucy.
Thank you, Lucy. Next, I'd like to call up Mr. John Cordes.
Good evening, Mayor Mann and City Council members. As you know, for the last almost 10 years, I've been a planning commissioner for the City of Temple City. However, tonight I'm not speaking as a commissioner, I'm speaking as a concerned citizen. I've lived in Temple City for 46 years. My kids have grown up here. This is my town. Last week, I received numerous communications from my neighbors, friends, associates regarding the meeting that was held in El Monte, the Planning Commission, and the approval of conditional use permits for the commercial growing of marijuana at the 4-acre site located at 4400 El Monte Boulevard, Temple City Boulevard, sorry. As you know, the property is directly across the street from Temple City Homes. I learned later that El Monte is considering another 10 applications. According to Lucy, that number has grown to 20. This is incredible. In addition to the list of objections that residents in Temple City have presented to me, they basically have concerns that El Monte has not acted in good faith and has not solicited their input on any of this. In the past, Temple City has worked closely with El Monte on a number of important projects to the benefit of both cities. And I can name the Home Depot Center, the Linden Walk project that provided additional housing, some 70 units, to members of our community. Temple City Sheriff's Department and the Sheriff's Station at Temple City provides emergency backup service to the El Monte Police Department. Temple City Fire Station number 47 provides emergency services to El Monte in the form of fire and emergency and medical treatment. These are examples of how cities should work together. Unfortunately, this latest decision is not an example of that at all. It's to the contrary. I'm very distressed and very concerned about this. I wanted to say that I did not have the opportunity to see the commission and attend the presentation myself, but I did see it on video recording afterwards, sat through all 3 hours and 48 minutes of it, very lengthy. I can say this, it was not a unanimous decision. There was a lot of discussion, and the chairman of the committee, I give him a lot of courage, or a lot of congratulations for his courage. He stood up and he said no. And he said, this does not belong here. And I agree 100%. I can't see how anybody can suggest that an agriculture business belongs in a city of 118,000 and in a community, a larger community of 500,000 people. We have a number of issues that we try to deal with in terms of traffic, pollution, crime, you name it. It goes on and on and on. This is a whole different set of issues, and I believe that the city of El Monte has taken a misstep. I wanted to say briefly that I'm very appreciative of Temple City's City Council and their stance on this position. As I understand it, they've hired an excellent legal firm to represent Temple City in this issue. And I couldn't think of a better attorney to represent Temple City. In final and conclusion, I guess I want to say is I'm hoping that citizens of Temple City will express their concerns. First of all, look at Temple City's website and study and identify what the issues really are. I could go on, but I'm limited and I already went over my time. Sorry about that. I'll wrap it up. Study the issues. That's the biggest problem. We have until the 18th of December. I'm hoping that you'll email the Director of Community Development in the city of El Monte. She's the one that has to tabulate the responses. And finally, I hope you'll join me as I make my protest known to the city of El Monte and the City Council meeting on December 18th. Keep in mind, their meeting starts at 6 p.m., unlike our meeting, it starts at 7:30. So I know it's going to be difficult for some people because they're working, but the meeting does start at 6 o'clock on the 18th. Okay. Thank you very much, and I appreciate your time.
Thank you, John.
Thank you.
John, do you know, is that a different time schedule for them, for that meeting, or do they normally start?
I believe that's their normal time. 7. Is it 7? Yes. Okay, yeah,
Okay,
please check
we'll double
me out.
check. We'll double check the
I
time.
thought it was 6 p.m., but.
Maybe it's a closed session that they're having beforehand.
Okay, thank you. I know there's a parking lot in the back, and so if you get there early, there's parking space.
Okay, thank you, John. Next, I'd like to call up Mr. Frank Rudell.
Thank you. Franklin Riddell, Bartlett Avenue, Temple City, California. I wish to mirror what we've already heard concerning the El Monte issue. I would ask for a letter from the city. I find paper stronger and the written word stronger than emails, personally. In fact, I print things off to read them for that reason. But anyway, that's what I'm here to request. I think, I see what we're doing as a society is duplicating what we did for those who used to smoke. And we all know what we've had to go through with that issue. And I see this coming again with the marijuana issue. It's strictly an issue to raise taxes. And I don't see that benefiting anybody in that sense. We have plenty of other ways to accomplish that without adding another item to the list. So I just can't, the other item is this leads to heavier drugs than just marijuana. We all think that the cigarette stop was someplace, and we see the same thing with drinking, but we still have the same problems with all of these various issues with accidents and moving into other types of things that I don't care to go into right this instant, but I think we're all aware of it. So we have to stop at some place. So why do we want to encourage it just for tax dollars? Thank you.
Thank you, Frank. Next, I'd like to call up Mr. Peter Choi.
Good evening, Mayor, City Council, City staff, assembled Temple Cityans. I'm Peter Choi, President of the Temple City Chamber of Commerce. Just here with two very quick announcements. The first is, once again this year, the Chamber is supporting the LA County Fire Department's Spark of Love holiday toy drive. So if you'd like to bring cheer to a child this holiday season, please drop off an unwrapped toy or sports equipment at the Chamber office before December 17th, which is the Monday. And then after that, we will deliver it right next door to our local fire department. Our office hours are 10 to 5. We're closed from 12 to 1. And our address is 9050 Las Tunas Drive, for now. The second announcement is the papers you have in front of you. Our local church organization members, a few of them, are presenting a Temple City Walking Nativity. And it's on Sunday, December 16th, 6 to 8 p.m. It's a free, family-friendly, live outdoor walkthrough with live music and complimentary refreshments. There are 5 steps right in this area, actually, at the local churches. 5 steps with different chapters of Jesus' birth and life. It starts at Mideast Evangelical Church, then you walk to First United Methodist Church, then you walk to First Baptist Church of Temple City, and then Temple City Emmanuel Church of the Nazarene, and then it ends in Temple City Park. Parking is free at any of these local churches. It's a fun event. Certainly puts the Christ in Christmas, one might say. And if anybody is interested in either of these 2 public notices and you did not pick up a pen in time, do not worry. Both these notices are in the December issue of Temple City Life, so you can follow up on that. And we hope that you will participate in both these seasonal activities. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Peter.
Thank you, Peter.
Is there anyone else who'd like to address the City Council at this time? Okay, seeing none, I'm going to close public comment, and we move on to the consent calendar item, and I believe Mr. Brian Cook has something you'd like to add.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor, and members of the council. One point of clarification on item 7E regarding the contract for the study of the development fees. One thing that was not in the staff report, my apologies, that was my fault. We did do an open RFP process for this. We did get 6 responses, and the most qualified firm was selected, but we did do an RFP process for this project. So I just wanted to, that's just a point of clarification. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Is there any comments? Yes.
Just wanted to see if we could, if I could ask a couple questions on the transportation and public safety actions.
Okay, so you'd like to pull 7C? Yes. Okay. Can I have a motion for the remaining items?
Motion to approve.
Second.
All right. We have a motion and a second. Can we get a roll call for those items, please?
Councilmember Chavez?
Yes.
Councilmember Sternquist?
Yes.
Councilmember Yu?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Fish?
Yes.
Mayor Mann?
Yes. All right, Councilmember Sternquist, 7C is yours.
Yes, in looking at the minutes from the Planning and Transportation Public Safety Commission actions, in looking back, something triggered my mind that it seemed that when the Public Safety Commission seems like the main job is listening to the ticket citations. So I know that takes up a lot of the time, but of the meeting, when I was looking through them, it seemed like there was a consistent pattern of citations that were upheld and those that were not. And it seemed like it was like almost a 50-40% ratio, 50% or 60-40% ratio, where more of the citations were not upheld. And I was wondering if we could, since, if there is a pattern, or if we could get some information as to the type of tickets that are not being withheld. It seemed like that's an awful lot of tickets that are coming to our Public Safety Commission meeting, and for one reason or not, I know it's a great venue for people to come and express their concerns, but I also think that if there's some type of pattern, that if it's all, one type of infraction, then maybe there's something that the city can do to improve that area where this infraction is taking place. So I didn't see like specifics, but if we could just kind of look, because I think that's an awful lot of tickets that are not being upheld. So it makes me think that there might be a process that the city has in place that maybe should be tweaked or at least looked at.
I can work with staff to just get a sense, a general idea of what kind of violations are being, going through the process, because this is a judicial process as well, so it's a part of the process that could be due process for the violator or potential violator. So we absolutely talk to staff and take a look and see, is there something is it a red curve? What is it type of thing?
Right. I mean, it seems
Sure.
like, because they're doing, they're looking at the information and making judgments based on, the facts that the people come up and tell. And oftentimes those people come with pictures,
Yep.
I know. So maybe it's something that we need to look at, and they might be similar. And then the other question was, when it says that they were, they were upheld by written declaration, or they were dismissed by written declaration, is that where they just write in a
Correct.
response?
Yeah, they don't have to appear.
And who is in charge of reading those and making a decision? Do those come before the Public Safety
Yes,
Commission
they
also?
do. Staff will get all the requisite paperwork together, get it in front of the body that actually does that part of the hearing.
Okay.
And then they make their determination.
And they do them at the
Yes.
meetings. And those also had a very high percentage of citations that were dismissed.
Well, in the last year, they had 5 and all 5 were upheld.
Well, I'm looking from May through September.
You have more information than I do. Where did you see
May
that?
through October, actually. I went back and looked
Oh.
at all the agendas.
Okay, we'll follow up.
I know there was one where there were, I think, 8 one month, and 6 of them were dismissed, and 2 were upheld.
I'll take a look and see.
Okay, that's all.
Okay.
Thank
Alright.
you.
Thank you. So I guess can I have a motion for 7C?
Make a motion to approve?
Okay.
Second.
All right, can get a roll call on 7C, please?
Councilmember Chavez?
Yes.
Councilmember Sternquist?
Yes.
Councilmember Yu?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Fish?
Yes.
Mayor Mann?
Yes. All right, we move on to public hearing. We have none. Unfinished business, we also have none. New business, we have an overview of the planning and building processes. Mr. Cook?
I'll give Mr. Forbes just a minute to get to the podium. I'll wait 1 sec.
We'll be back in a minute. All right, Mr. Cook.
Mayor Mann, members of the council, before you tonight, rather than doing a 20 or 15-page report about the city's planning and building process, staff has developed the presentation you're going to see tonight to walk the council through really the basis, steps, and rationale, what can be viewed many times as a very complex process of building, plan check, and our planning process. One of the challenges we have as a small contract city like ours is providing these services with the right balance and delivering those services to our constituents and those constituents vary. Making it both economically feasible, which means balancing counter service hours, staffing, and other critical behind the scenes support services as well. To find this kind of optimal level of services really to meet the needs of our community is always challenging. And one of the key factors of that is a lot of times due to the cyclical nature of economic activity. When times are good, a lot of things are happening at the counter, a lot of things are happening with building and safety and activity with building. When times are tough, there's an ebb and flow of that activity over time. So tonight, we're really making an effort to and going to have a discussion broken up into some key components. The first part of the discussion will be why are there even building and safety functions and planning functions in a city? The short answer is we're really managing the built environment. Why do we have a development review process? Well, that's to help facilitate development according to some guiding documents. Things like your recently approved general plan, your recently approved zoning code, and things that we don't have as much discretion on, the state building codes. Then the other part of the discussion will lend itself into the building and plan check process and permits. These are really just the mechanisms of approval for the latter, for how you go through the development review process and what you have with your building and safety functions and your planning functions. And lastly, the last part of the discussion will go over the construction and inspection process. And that process is about ensuring the standards and the safety of the built environment. So we'll start off with why we do what we do, from a building and planning standpoint, managing the built environment, the development review process, the facilitating the development according to those guiding documents and processes and policies that the council and other entities develop, the plan check process itself, those mechanisms of approval, and the construction and inspection process. Staff did take the extra step this time, and it's in your packet, of actually talking to many of the developers and builders in our community to talk to them about our process. We actually had a third-party entity, our architectural review firm who assists us with architectural review, to have some discussion about some things we do well and some things we don't do as well, and have hopefully as candid of a conversation as you can possibly have. So tonight, our building and safety and our planning executive management team will walk you through this presentation, and we've been looking forward to this discussion. So with that, I'll hand it over to Mr. Forbes.
Can we dim the lights a little bit so I can see it better?
Too much, sorry.
Yeah, that's good.
Thank you. Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the City Council. This presentation is not short, so feel free to interrupt me at any point if you have questions or need to take a bathroom break or anything like that.
If we interrupt you, that would just make it longer.
I'll make it longer. That's okay.
Like that interruption.
So as Mr. Cook pointed out, really what we're talking about is the processes that get us to the built environment and what Temple City looks like. So tonight we're going to be focusing on planning and building, but I just wanted to point out at the beginning there's a number of other pieces to the puzzle: engineering, forestry, utilities. All of these things function together and get thrown into the box and jumbled up to result in the built environment of Temple City. Planning and building are two very different processes. They're often in the same department, and they often go hand in hand. A lot of people kind of think of them as the same process or don't always understand the difference between the two processes, but they are two very distinct and separate processes that have different purposes and goals. So I'm going to walk through that a little bit before we get into the actual process itself. So the purpose of planning, which is derived from the city's police power, is to protect the public health, safety, and welfare, and to maintain and improve the quality of life of our residents and our businesses. Building has similar goals to preserve and protect the public health and safety. Could probably add welfare on there too, similar to planning, but health and safety are really the focuses of the building process, and the building code is intended to protect life and property. So in order to accomplish those goals, the planning process and the zoning code and plans that come out of that, they focus more on how buildings look and function. So we're talking about things like setbacks, height limitations, what kind of businesses can be in the buildings. Also looking at how buildings can interact with one another in the surrounding environment. So when we have requirements like if you're adjacent to a residential property, you can't have a balcony or you can't have a window or things like that. Focusing on the community character, so that gets into the architecture of the buildings, how the buildings relate to the community's history, and what kind of character they establish, and then the compatibility of the buildings and the uses within those buildings. How well do they all harmonize together in the community? So the goal of that process is buildings that are attractive and functional and that provide a sense of place and community for Temple City. The building code and the building process is a little bit different. The focus there is how buildings are constructed, how they're occupied, and how they're operated. So when we talk about things like height limits and setbacks and landscaping and things like that that are in the zoning code, the building code typically doesn't limit those types of things or doesn't necessarily care what your setback or your height is. It just says if it's going to be this, then you need to build the building this way. So you can have a zero setback, but that means you can't have any openings because you need to have a fire protected wall, whereas the zoning code would say, well, you can't have a zero setback. So this is where we start getting into the differences between the two. The building code has a lot of focus on seismic and fire safety, focus on entering, exiting, and using the building space when we start talking about occupancy types and occupant loads and things like that. Accessibility, that is compliance with both the ADA as well as the California accessibility laws for disabled individuals. And then more and more we're starting to see, has been for a long time, but gets more complicated every year, dealing with energy use and water use and conservation of energy and water and how the construction of buildings deals with that. So the goal of that process is buildings that are safe, that are efficient, and increasingly looking at buildings that are sustainable. So how we get to these two processes, the planning process, as you may remember, because we've just gone through it recently with our general plan update, the foundation of that is the community's vision for itself. What does it want to be? What does it want its built environment to look like? And then the guiding principles that come out of that. How are we going to achieve that vision? That's accomplished through the general plan document, which has the goals and policies and the implementation program. That in turn leads you into specific plans and the zoning code, and then in some cases design guidelines. So all of that is dictating ultimately what the community is going to look like, what is the community character going to be. And that all feeds into the development and project review process, which I'll be getting to in a minute. The building code has a different foundation. It's not based on what the local community wants or what the community's vision or principles are. The building code is more universal. It's used statewide, countrywide, and now internationally. And the building code is based on, often when there's a major seismic event or something like that, you'll see building codes change because it's based on real world examples of how buildings perform. Every time there's a major earthquake, we see some type of building failure and we say, oh, now we know for next time we need to use a bigger beam there or a better connection there or make the concrete thicker there. So that's how that code evolves over time. As lessons are learned. It's also based on technological advancement. Just like in everything else, the technologies and how you build buildings are always changing and improving, and the code has to respond to that. So the building code today is born out of the International Code Council, which establishes the International Building Code. That filters down through the California Building Standards Commission, of which we're very fortunate that our building officials from TransTech have participated in that process and have had input into the state code. So we're fortunate to have them and their expertise. That ultimately ends up with our Bible, as it were, which is the California Building Code, or Title 24. Then it even gets finer grained at the local level because the California Building Code is adapted into the Los Angeles County Building Code, which in turn is adopted by local cities as the local building code. So you may remember a couple of years ago when we came before you to adopt our own building code, which is our own variation of the county code, which is the county's variation of the state code, which is a variation of the international code. So it's all a house of cards, I guess. That's not a good analogy, but it all filters down to the local level, and that's what we enforce, and then that feeds into the plan, check, permit, and inspection processes, which I will get to. So we're going to start with the development review process, which is on the planning side of things. Tried to make it a little bit more user-friendly by color coding this, so hopefully I think you can make it out okay. So the items in yellow on here are items that the project applicant is generally responsible for. Items in blue are things that the city staff is generally responsible for. So it just gives you an idea of kind of the back and forth through the process. So the first step in the process is, of course, an application is submitted, but actually even before that, often we have pre-application meetings and discussions. Sometimes there are informal meetings at the counter. Sometimes there are more formal meetings that are planned ahead of time, where we get the staff around the table and the applicant around the table and start taking an early look at the project to make sure that they're headed in the right direction, make sure there aren't any major surprises once they come time to submit their application.
Who is typically the applicant? The developer?
The
owner? Or?
It depends on the project. Usually it's a developer or a builder. Sometimes it's an architect. So it's typically, if it's like a conditional use permit for a restaurant or another type of business, often it's the business owner that's the applicant, or a consultant that they've hired to represent them. For construction, it's usually a builder or an architect. And I should note this process and the discussion that we'll have tonight is we've focused on the types of applications that we most commonly see in Temple City. The more complicated the project is and the larger the project is, that you can add more boxes to this flowchart and there's more steps involved. But to try and keep it as simple as possible, we're focusing on generally single-family homes, small multifamily projects, small commercial projects, which is the type of project that we typically see here. So once the application is completed, the first step, submitted, the first step is that we review it for completeness. Under state law, we have 30 days to do that, and reviewing for completeness means, do we have all of the information that we need in order to process the application? Are the plans complete? Is all the information shown? If it's a new business, do we know what its hours of operation are going to be? How many employees it's going to have? Did they dot all the I's and cross all the T's on the application form? So that's the first step step in the process. Very often, we find that the application is not complete, either because they omitted some information or the plans don't show everything they need to show, and then we send it back to them and say, hey, we need this additional information. So that could be a loop of boxes on this diagram where we go around with the applicant sometimes a couple times to get a complete application. Once the application is complete and we have all the information we need, we route it out to different departments. So the planners in planning will start reviewing the project for zoning code compliance. TransTech will take it, and their plan checkers will start reviewing it for building code compliance. The LA County Fire Department will get a copy of the plans for certain projects and start reviewing it for emergency access, sprinklers, and their needs. And I've put fire in red on these diagrams because they kind of have their own process and have their own timelines, and usually we're chasing after them, trying to make sure that they're moving along at the same pace that we are.
Is not to get ahead of ourselves, but I'm assuming you're going to go over some of the recommendations by the people you had focus group.
Yes.
And I noticed that one of those concerns was with the fire department, that they tend to be a little slow. And so
yes.
Are those issues that we're going to discuss tonight, or are those issues that the city is going to be looking into?
We have been working with the fire department. Scott has actually started a process with the COG, the SGV COG, and has opened up dialogue with the fire department. We here had a meeting with fire department staff. We asked them to come in and sit down with us and had a very productive meeting with them, helping them to understand our process and us understand their process, and getting a better sense of how we can do all that we can do on our side to help them work as quickly and efficiently as possible.
Just so it's clear for everyone, we're not referring to our fire department next door. We're referring to the main office, where I don't know where they come from.
Right. There's multiple regional offices that do the plan review, and that's part of the issue, is that it's difficult for an agency as large as they are and covering as big of an area as they do. It's difficult sometimes to have consistency. The plans for Temple City are reviewed by the Office in Commerce. So the plans are taken down there, or the applicants have to take their plans down there and have them reviewed. And then we communicate with them as needed.
Okay, thank you.
So Michael, regarding the review for completeness, I know it's going to vary from different project type to project type, but for, I don't want to call it the lowest common denominator, but for, say, an applicant who is not a developer and not as familiar with the processes, is there a way for them to be able to have a checklist of items that they need to meet? Because some of the emails that I get over the last couple of years seem to come from applicants who may not understand our processes very well, and so they get a little bit lost. So is there an opportunity up front for that to be made very clear to them, or are there challenges to not being able to provide like a checklist type thing for applicants?
No, we do have checklists for laying out the information that they need to provide, and we're more than happy on the planning side and on the building side. We're more than happy to meet with people either at the counter or in a prearranged meeting to talk them through the process and go over everything that they need to submit. Sometimes the challenge with, for example, a homeowner who's trying to build their own ADU, for example, sometimes people try to save as much money as possible, so they don't want to hire an architect or a contractor. They want to try and do it themselves. And sometimes, a pencil sketch on the back of a napkin is, not adequate for us to review it. And that's an extreme case, but I mean, we have seen that.
Yeah, we've had issues like that come to the council in the past. I recall where there was a disconnect about what was required or what wasn't, and I think the issue came up at that time. Well, what do we provide to the applicant? Is there a checklist, or what do we tell them? But it sounds like you're
Yeah.
willing and able to work with them
We
individually.
will do everything we can, and often we are able to successfully help people through the process. Sometimes it gets to the point where we just have to tell them, I'm sorry, but you're really going to need to hire an architect to help you with this because you're not getting it, and we can only go so far. We, as the city, we can't design their project for them or draw their plans for them because that, there's a host of liability and other concerns that go along with that. So we go as far as we can, but sometimes it's just to the point where the only advice we can give them is, I'm sorry, but you really need to hire a professional to help you with this.
Thank you.
So following, or usually during actually the project review process, most of the project types that we do here do require some sort of public notice to be mailed and some sort of public participation. So the notices are mailed out, and the radius for that and who they are mailed to varies a bit from project to project, but the main purpose of all of it is to make the community aware of what's happening and to answer their questions, solicit any feedback that they have. While that's going on, staff is also doing the analysis for the project. So there's different types of applications. Ministerial applications are those where all we're doing is reviewing it for code compliance. Does it meet the code, yes or no? And if it meets the code, then we have to approve it. Then there's the discretionary applications where it gets more into issues like, is it compatible with the surrounding area? Is it meeting the intent of the design guidelines? Those are the areas where there's more flexibility, be it staff or the planning commission making that decision. So we're looking at the standards, policies, and guidelines of the city and applying those to the project. Depending on the type of project, there's often findings that have to be made. The most familiar is with a conditional use permit, finding that it's not going to have a detrimental impact on neighboring properties, that it's compatible with neighboring properties, and those sorts of things. And then public input is always an important part of that process, hearing the public's concerns and that, directing our review of the projects accordingly. So then, and again, depending on the type of project, if it's something that's going to planning commission, then we will prepare a staff report. The staff report has the analysis of the project and then has a recommendation from the staff to either approve the project, deny the project, or approve it with some modifications. Often those modifications are achieved through conditions of approval, which we have the ability to place on discretionary applications. So sometimes the conditions are related to the operation of the business, like the hours of operation or where the employees have to park or those kinds of things. Sometimes it's related to the design of the building and requires changes to the design of the building in order for the project to be approved. So after all of that, we arrive at the decision, and most of the projects that we have here are single-family homes, which are approved administratively, meaning we issue an approval. The planner writes a letter to the applicant and says, your project is approved. Here you go. There's no public hearing. It doesn't go to planning commission. The next level above that, which is for apartments and for commercial projects, is the director public hearing, where I am actually sitting as the decision maker. And it's similar to a planning commission public hearing, except that it's with me instead of with the planning commission. And then finally, for condominiums and then for conditional use permits, variances, and applications like that, then it's going to the planning commission and having a public hearing. So the planning commission, in most cases, is the final decision maker unless an appeal is filed, and appeals can be filed either by the public or by the project applicant. So if the project was denied or if they disagreed with some conditions of approval that were placed, then the applicant could also appeal it. If they're appealing a decision of the director, it gets appealed to the planning commission, and then, as you know, if it's a planning commission decision, that gets appealed to you, and then you are the final decision maker. So once we get through all of that, the next step is the plan check and permit process, which we'll get to in a minute. The timelines for the planning process for development review, as I've already repeated a few times, it varies based on the type of project and how far up the approval ladder it has to go. For projects that don't require a public hearing, which for us is typically the 2-story single-family homes, our process time right now is running around 3 months, and that's from the time that the application is deemed complete and ready for processing to the time that it's approved. For projects that require a public hearing, either with the director or the planning commission, we're running 3 to 6 months, and that additional time is generally because of the staff preparing the staff report takes time. There's also usually an additional public notice requirement that goes with that, which takes a little more time. And then if for projects that are appealed, add a few more months onto that because it's another public hearing and another staff report and another set of noticing that's required. So the timeline is largely dependent upon how much public notice is given and what opportunities there are for public input, and then, as I indicated, preparing the staff report. The other aspect that drives this timeline is the applicant responsiveness and timeliness. If we need more information or if the application's been deemed incomplete, getting that information from them in a timely manner and getting the complete information that we need often will cause delays in the process, and we don't always account for that in our timelines. It's just part of the overall time. If the council tonight is interested in getting into a decision about how we can change or shorten the process, we wanted to note that opportunities to simplify and shorten the development review process should always be weighed against the effects on public participation. Again, given that the noticing takes up a chunk of that time, and as well as the quality of the project, because part of the time that we take is reviewing it for design guidelines, making sure that it's quality architecture, in some cases sending it out to our architectural consultant to review. So the more you streamline the process, the more you're potentially sacrificing that. And I'd also wanted to note, just the last bullet point there, that there's only so much that we can limit in some cases. Anything that requires a public hearing requires public notice under state law, and the timelines for that are dictated by state law. The 10-day timeline is dictated under state law, so there's only so much that we can do in some cases to streamline it, because we still have to be compliant with state planning law.
And you have to send those notices out when you do it also? When it's just you making the decision of planning?
Typically, yes.
Mr. Forbes, have we compared our process with other agencies? It seems like kind of long, 3 months for a project without public hearing, two-story.
We have. I'll get to that shortly.
Okay. All right.
Oh, the next slide, actually. So we did contact a number of other cities. We didn't get responses from everybody we contacted, so you'll see there are a couple of bigger cities on here, Burbank and Glendale, but most of these are San Gabriel Valley cities. So this is a simplified table where we looked at their process and said, okay, for each of these different types of projects, is this city's process generally shorter or simpler than ours? Is it the same, or is it a longer process? So you can see, going through each of these, for a new one-story house, there were no cities that had a shorter, simpler process than we do. And in fact, 6 of the 9 cities that we surveyed had a longer process, meaning there was some additional level of review for a one-story house that we don't have. For a new 2-story house, it was kind of spread more across the board, but you can see there still the majority of cities have a longer process than we do for 2-story homes. Same thing with 2-story additions. Most cities, it seems, generally have the same process for 2 stories, whether it's a new house or an addition. So again, the majority are longer than us. For new apartment buildings, there are a couple cities with shorter processes, but the majority of cities that we surveyed have a longer process. Everybody was on the same page for projects with condominium or tentative tract maps. Everybody requires planning commission review for those, so we were in the same place as everybody. And then for new commercial buildings, again, the majority of the cities had a longer, more complicated process than we do. So this slide looks at... I'm sorry, the next slide is the timelines. This slide I'll go quickly over. This just shows what the process was. So if we want to get into a more detailed discussion about the processes, I can refer back to this slide. But mainly for timelines is what you're interested in. So you can see, where we are, the 1 to 3 months for single-family homes. most of the cities, no city is doing anything in less than a month these days. A lot of cities are in the same boat that we are, in the 1 to 3 months for single-family homes. The red boxes on here indicate where we are, so you can see how we compare to others. We're generally with the majority of cities. We're a little bit longer on the new 2-story houses. You can see that we're running 3 to 6 months, whereas a lot of cities are running 1 to 3 months. But generally, otherwise, we're in the ballpark with our neighboring cities on the processing of these.
So if we took, say, the 2-story house example, from your perspective, would you attribute the time difference in review more towards resources, staff availability, or is it has more to do with the discretionary review process? We have maybe more stringent requirements, less stringent requirements. I know it's kind of a loaded question. It's going to be hard to answer, but what's sort of your take on that difference?
I think generally the cities that are doing it faster than us, there are two things. Some cities, we have a public notice requirement for 2-story homes. It's not a public hearing, but we do have a notice requirement. A lot of cities do not have that, so that adds a little time to the process. And then we also have design guidelines. So we're reviewing the projects not only for setbacks and height and things like that, but also for the architectural quality, the materials quality, and other things like that to make sure that it complies with the design guidelines. We also have in our code the bonuses that you can get increased floor area ratio if you do things like enhanced landscaping, certain design features. So sometimes it'll take a little more time to review that or to go back and forth with the applicant and say, hey, you're not meeting the intent of this. You need to change X, Y, Z, and doing some of that back and forth. So the easiest, quickest ways to streamline the process would be get rid of the public notice requirement and get rid of the design guidelines. But then you're sacrificing the opportunity for the community to be aware of it and give input. And then with no design guidelines, you're sacrificing the architectural quality and ending up with houses that may or may not fit in with the neighborhood. So that's the trade-off.
Okay, thanks.
So wrapping up the development review process, as Mr. Cook mentioned, we assembled a customer focus group a few months ago. We sent out invitations to all of the designers and builders that we could find that had done business with us over the last couple of years, and we ended up with 10 people, which was a pretty good group, and we were very happy that they agreed to come spend a couple hours with us on a Wednesday morning. We talked through all of these processes with them and asked them to identify, opportunities that they saw for input. And the complete report from that study group is attached to your staff report, so you can read that in its entirety. On the development review process, pretty much all of the feedback that we got from them was positive. And they noted that our process is generally faster than the other cities that they work in. So they didn't have anything in particular that they pointed out.
Were these builders and developers that I'm assuming build and develop in Temple City?
Yes, all of them have projects here.
Is that it's fair to say that that's an unbiased? Since I do business in the city, I would hazard a guess that they wouldn't necessarily be too critical.
Well, that was a concern. That was one of the reasons that we hired an outside consultant to lead the group, because we didn't want any of us to be in the room. We didn't want them to feel pressured that they needed to say nice things about us or not be critical. It was the feedback was given anonymously too. The consultant, when she did her report, did not indicate who said what. So we think we got some hopefully honest feedback from them.
No, I'm not saying they were not honest. I'm just saying sometimes when you want to get a unbiased, you maybe not want to deal with the people you deal with on a daily basis. So.
Sure. So the next step, was there any last questions on the development review process before I jump into the next one? So now we're at the point where either staff or the planning commission, whoever it is, has given the approval. It's cleared the planning process. It complies with the zoning code and the design guidelines. The next step in the process is submitting for building plan check. So now we're done with planning and we're entering into, does the project comply with the building code, which is a very different question than does it comply with the zoning code. So the first step again in the process is submitting the plans, usually for a full new building. There are structural plans, there are mechanical plans, which is the ventilation and HVAC systems. There's plumbing plans, there's electrical plans, and then depending on the project site, there may be grading plans also showing how they're going to move the dirt around on the site before they actually build. There are application forms that go with that, and then the building code actually requires that the plan check fees be paid in full at the time plan check is submitted. We often get people asking, well, can I make a deposit? Can I pay you half? And the answer is no, because we are in turn paying TransTech to do the plan checking for us, and the building code requires that we collect everything up front, so that makes it easy for us to say, no, you have to pay everything. Each of the disciplines is reviewed separately, meaning that when TransTech receives the plans, they have plan checkers that do structural plans, they have different plan checkers that do electric plans, they have different plan checkers that do plumbing plans. So they route the plans out to each of their plan checkers who is the expert in that field to do that review. They prepare their own comments on that. Our goal is to get that done for the vast majority of projects in 2 weeks or less, so 10 working days or less, and we've found that we're fairly consistently hitting that target. That's lower than most other cities. We weren't able, unfortunately, to get good data from other cities on what their plan check times were, but just based on our own experiences and TransTech's experiences with other cities, that's a pretty quick turnaround time. When those plans come back, the plans are redlined by the plan checkers, and then there's also separate written comments that are provided, and those are all given back to the applicant. Be it usually at this point, it's either the architect and or engineers that are involved in the submittal process at this point. So those are all provided back to them. The ball is then in their court to revise the plans to address all of those comments. Then once they're done with that, they resubmit for the second round of plan check, and the process repeats itself. Usually the goal is to try and get plans approved within 2 to 3 rounds of plan check. Occasionally we end up going 4, 5, 6 rounds or more, and that's usually a result of architects or engineers that may or may not be entirely familiar with what they need to do or are having difficulty making plans that are compliant. And again, TransTech is very good about, they'll sit down and meet with applicants and go over the plans and do all that we can to help them get through the process short of drawing the plans for them. Once everything is found to comply with the building code and all that round of plan check is done, the plans then go back to planning for a final review to make sure that as we were complying with the building code, we weren't moving walls or getting rid of parking spaces or anything like that, which does occasionally happen. So we do a final review to make sure that it still complies with the zoning code, and at that point the plan check is completed and the building permit is ready to issue. The approval of the plan check is valid for 1 year from the time that the plan check was originally submitted. There's sometimes a gap between plan check being approved and the permits actually being issued. Sometimes that's because typically going through the plan check process, it's an architect or an engineer that's shepherding that. By the time you get to a building permit, it's usually a contractor that's pulling that permit. So there may be a delay between the two while a contractor is hired, or sometimes it's a funding issue and they're waiting to get their construction loan, so they can't come pull the permit until they have their loan. So sometimes there is a delay there before the permit is issued. At the time the permit is issued, again, the permit fees are due in full. And then once that permit is issued, it's valid for a period of 6 months. We do have the option to extend that, and we often do. But at least at the beginning, it's valid for 6 months. And what the 6 months is, it's basically a rolling time period. that you have to call for an inspection at least once every 6 months. So we want to make sure that the project is continuing to move. So every time you have an inspection, you get another 6 months to call for another inspection. And we do have the ability to extend that in some circumstances, but our goal is to just make sure that the project continues
Is
moving
that pretty
along.
typical every 6 months, pretty much? Is that typical of other cities?
Of other cities, yes.
That's a standard across the state.
Yeah.
Mr. Forbes, here you mentioned about permit fees. They pay more than just permit fees. They pay school fees. and a
Yes,
bunch
there
of
are other
other-
fees that are paid there. The city itself has our park development fee and our sewer reconstruction fee. They also have to pay school district fees.
and a deposit for fixing the roads. And
Yes, sometimes if there's grading involved, they may have to do a security deposit or a bond with us for the grading work, and as well as if there's work in the public right of way, they may have to do a bond for that, depending on how much work is required. So yes, there are other monies that are associated with that. So once you have the permit and the work begins, then you go into the construction and inspection process. But before we get to that point, I'll talk a little bit more about the plan check and permit process. The process is largely dictated by the building code. This isn't an area where, each city has its own building code, but as I mentioned before, it comes from the county, which comes from the state, which comes from the international code. So this process is fairly uniform across all jurisdictions. As I mentioned, we are consistently meeting our plan check review target of 10 working days. And again, as with the planning process, a lot of the time that's consumed through this process is not under the city's control, but it's under the applicant's control. It takes the applicant a lot longer to revise plans than it takes us to review them. So that is a time eater there, as well as I indicated, if there's multiple rounds of plan check that are required, that can add time to the process. Sometimes there's funding issues where the applicant may not be able to pay their architects or engineers, and they generally don't like to work on plans when they're not being paid. So we do occasionally see those kinds of delays in the process. We also unfortunately see issues where the applicant and the architect may not be communicating with one another, or the architect is trying to explain to the applicant that, hey, I have to do this because the building code requires it and the city is making me do it, and the applicant is saying they want something different. And we try not to play referee in those situations, but we will, again, we're always happy to sit down if the architect is having difficulty explaining something to their client about why something is required. We're happy to sit down and have that conversation with them also. Excuse me, I'm going to take a drink really quick. So this table shows, this is a actual data of a recent plan check that we did for a mixed-use development project. So we just are using this to illustrate these timelines are obviously much longer than we would see with a single-family home. You can see our initial time for review is 25 days as opposed to our usual 10. So these timelines are longer than usual, but the point of this was to demonstrate how much time the ball is spent in the applicant's court as opposed to how much time the ball is spent in the city's court. So in this case, 69 total days of city review versus 196 days of the applicant revising the plans. We talked to the customer focus group about this process also. They had a few minor comments, nothing that we considered showstoppers or anything major. They did have a few constructive comments, and we're in the process of working on addressing some of those things, just to make the process a little smoother for them. And as was noted, one of their major concerns is the fire department, and we're doing what we can to address that also. One of the questions that we asked, because we do hear comments occasionally and receive questions about the fact that we only have building services Monday through Thursday and do not have services on Fridays. So we asked them specifically, is this a problem for you, and would you like to see services offered on Fridays? Their general comment was that, yeah, if the city had building service every Friday or even every other Friday, that would be nice. But we're pretty used to the schedule that you have now, so it's not really a big deal. There's quite a few cities in the San Gabriel Valley that are on 410 schedules, so a lot of the contractors are just used to not having that service on Fridays.
How long has that been in effect, no Fridays?
For us?
For us.
To my knowledge, when the city switched from a 410 to a 980 schedule a few years ago, the building staff remained on a 410 schedule. So as far as I know, I don't know if anybody knows anything different than me, but as far as I know, we have not offered it since then.
We talked about it.
I think that we made the switch back in 2000.
We were on council, I
Yeah,
think.
yeah.
It was probably, I want to say 6 years ago.
Yeah, I'm gonna say 6 years.
It's been a while.
More than that, I think it's
more.
than- yeah.
So yeah, it's been a while.
About 10 years.
It's been a while, and actually Scott just reminded me that before TransTech, when we had the county doing plan check, the county is also closed on Fridays, so we didn't have services then either.
Is there anybody open on Fridays? I mean, is there?
I thought the few offices
Some-
open 5 days though.
Yeah, some of the
We
county
actually
field offices.
did a survey.
Yeah,
There are
the
some.
Bowen office opens 5 days.
There's some cities are
Baldwin's
open
days.
every
5 days.
Friday. Some cities do a rotating or alternating 980, where City Hall in its entirety is closed every other Friday.
Yeah.
So it's a really mixed bag. We actually did a survey a while back of what goes on around us, just so we knew what we were competing with.
So it would be fair to say that no one's breaking the doors down on Friday to try to get in to get this done.
No.
All right.
And we asked them specifically, if we offered services on Fridays but made you pay for it, like if you wanted to, get a plan check on Friday but you had to pay hourly for it, would you be willing to do that? And they all said no. So they
Gee,
can.
that's a surprise.
Yeah, they can work with the schedule that we have. What we found generally a lot of the customers that we have are repeat customers, and they get used to our schedule. They just know what it is and they work around it. So the next step after plan check and permit, so now we have the permit in hand and we're ready to start work. Now we get into the construction and inspection process. So the building process we've broken up into 2 pieces because they're really different, the pre-construction versus the construction phases. So the contractor and usually their subcontractors will go out and start the work, and at certain points in the process, the work has to be inspected. So if it's a new house, usually when they put the forms in for the new foundation, that has to be inspected before they pour the concrete, and then once they pour the concrete, that has to be inspected. So the contractors know at what point they need to call for inspection. They'll call us and make that request, and we unlike a lot of cities, we typically can honor next day inspection requests, which many cities can't, but we are able to do that in the vast majority of cases.
Getting back to Mayor Mann's question earlier about checklists, is this something that we have available that contractors, or is it just something known in the industry when they have to get these plan checks done?
I'm going to look at Dennis, but generally
We
yeah.
have a job card that indicates which
When it has to be.
Dennis, why don't you come to this?
That way we can get to see you. Thank you.
Thanks.
Good evening, Mayor, Council. Yes, we actually have a job card that indicates what inspections are required. They're listed in, the majority of time, in order. Our inspectors are also instructed to indicate what inspection after they perform inspection is next. So we try to do that. Every project is a little bit different, so.
So it's no surprise.
It's typically no surprise.
Okay.
Homeowners are always the most difficult, and we try to help them the most.
Good, thank you.
So I'm sorry, sorry, I thought I heard a question. Sometimes what will happen, and we actually face this a lot, is that a project will be changed while it's under construction. Sometimes the homeowner or the contractor decides they want different windows, or they want to make this window arched instead of straight across the top. It's an issue that we struggle with sometimes because contractors like to just go make changes and not let anybody know about it. So we do face that sometimes. The way it should work is that if it's a minor change that's not really going to affect the way that the building looks, if it's like a changing an interior wall or something like that, usually the building inspector can make the call in the field that either they're going to approve that, or in some cases they may require revised plans to be submitted just to document the change that was made. If it's a more major change, like I want to move this window or get rid of this door or something like that, then the inspector will let them know you can't just go do that. You need to have the architect draw up revised plans. They need to come into City Hall, have those plans reviewed by planning and by a building plan checker to make sure that it's still going to comply with zoning and the building code before that change is made.
There's a cost to that, right? I mean, for additional review.
Not typically. Usually the changes aren't that significant. I mean, if it's a major structural change or something like that that requires a lot of review, then it would be usually an hourly plan check review fee. But if it's a minor change that can be reviewed over the counter, typically there's no fee to that.
So for field calls, like you brought up the example of a change of an interior wall where you said the inspector might make a call in the field as to whether that warrants revisions. I think on the surface it might seem relatively minor, but if it does incur some sort of additional work that, time is money and all that. So I guess my comment is sort of how do we reduce the amount of sort of these subjective calls so that people are kind of know what to expect. I know there may be certain cases where it's going to be difficult to completely eliminate a certain type of discretionary review in the field, but sometimes it seems like a lot of the issues that at least we hear, or I should say myself, I hear from residents, seems like it comes down to certain discretionary type of observations that are made that at least they claim are not expected. So I don't know if there is a solution to that, or that's just sort of the nature of the business that we have to deal with. But it's something that seems to pop up every now and then.
Yeah, it's difficult. I mean, the hardline answer is the building that you build has to look exactly precisely like what's drawn on the plans, and if there's anything different than that, you need to come into City Hall and resubmit new plans. So we try to be more flexible than that, and if it is something truly minor that can be approved in the field. So it's hard to, and I don't know that we'd necessarily want to, publicize, hey, if you change XYZ, then we're going to approve it in the field and you won't have to come back into us, because people usually, give an inch, take a yard kind of thing is often what we run into. So we try to be as flexible as we can, but in the end, any time what you're building doesn't look exactly like what's on the plans, then it's going to have to be, somebody's going to have to make a call as to whether it's okay or not.
And that would seem to me to make perfect sense. Why would anybody say or try to argue, well, I know we told you it was this way, but we're actually doing it this way, and expect no one to say anything about that? I mean, is that what we get sometimes, I'm assuming?
Sometimes, yes.
I can understand a little discretion, but at the same time, we all live by rules, and I don't know. That's for another discussion another day, I guess.
We're just happy when they come in and get permits and try to go through the process instead of just doing it themselves.
Instead of finding out
we see that a
afterwards.
lot too.
Yeah. Well, we get a lot of that. We in the past, we've got a lot of requests for forgiveness rather than requests for permission.
Yes. Let's see. I think we've covered some of this already. So when we get to the end of the process, everything, all the work is done. The building inspector approves it. Planning will again come out and do a final inspection, looking for landscaping and finishes, and making sure that all of the finishes and fixtures and all the things that they said they were going to do on the plans and in the design to meet the design guidelines they've actually done. In cases where there were off-site improvements like new curb gutter, sidewalk, those types of things, a public works inspector will go out and inspect that work to make sure that it's done. And then at this point, the fire department also sends their own inspector out to do the inspection on the fire sprinklers and the alarm systems if there are any. Once all of that is signed off, at that point, we will notify the gas company that the utilities can be released. The gas company will not turn the gas on until we tell them that it's okay to do so. And then we will issue the certificate of occupancy, which is the last step in the process. The inspector will sign the permit indicating that it's been finalized, and then we issue an actual piece of paper that says that the building can be occupied. We will only do that for more complicated projects. We will only issue the certificate of occupancy once all of the conditions of approval are satisfied, all of the off-site improvements are done, and everything is wrapped up and approved, because that's the only thing we have to hold over the applicant or the developer to make sure that everything is satisfied, because once they have the certificate of occupancy in their hand, they're running down the road and not looking back. So that's the one thing we have that we can hold to be sure that everything that needs to be done gets done. As I said before, next day inspections are typically available. And the process is largely dictated by the building code. Part of the issue here is that as I said in the beginning, the primary purpose of the building code is to protect life and property. And life safety requirements, it's our responsibility as the city to make sure that those life safety requirements are met and enforced. So our inspectors and our building official have a great responsibility to make sure that that's done, because down the road, if something happens, that somebody is injured or property is lost, and then somebody comes back and says, well, why didn't the city inspect this properly, or why didn't the city do that properly, or we need to see all the records to show that this was approved. That's a big liability and responsibility on the city. So that's part of the reason that we're sticklers sometimes in this process, is because it's, if something isn't done properly, there's a chance that somebody could get injured or die. When you have an illegally converted garage with an extension cord plugged into an extension cord plugged into an extension cord, and then there's a fire, and then somebody dies, and then people start asking questions about, well, why wasn't this inspected? Why did the city allow this? So that's where we come from, and why we're sticklers about these things sometimes. Again, as with other parts of it, the most time-consuming parts of this process are not controlled by the city. Obviously, the construction itself is what takes up the most time. Very often, you have weather issues, you have unexpected site conditions that you run across, you have contractors that are not working, or you have funding issues. All of these different things can come into play during the construction process and take up the most time. Often also what we find is work that hasn't been done correctly that has to be corrected. When the inspector comes out and sees the work hasn't been done right, then they have to write a correction list, which means they have to come back and re-inspect that work before it can move on. Sometimes, as Dennis indicated, we do have the job cards that guide people through the inspection process, but sometimes contractors will get a little anxious and get ahead of themselves. And for example, if I need to inspect the pipes in that wall and the contractor gets anxious and puts the drywall up before I can inspect the pipes, then when the inspector comes, say, okay, you need to tear all that drywall off so I can see the pipes inside the wall. So then that, delays things too. So we do find that sometimes also. When we talk to the customer focus group about the inspection process, they didn't have any specific complaints or suggestions for improvement. They were happy to get the next day inspections. Again, we asked them specifically about the fact that we do not offer inspections on Fridays and whether that was an issue for them. Again, they said generally it's not a problem because they just know not to expect to get inspections on Fridays. We do know of at least one other city in the San Gabriel Valley that is on a 410 schedule but offers special inspections on Fridays if the applicant pays the hourly rate of the inspector. So we asked them, is that something you would be interested in if we offered that? And they said, if we have to pay for it, no, we're not interested in it. We'll take our inspection on Monday. One issue that I know this issue has been brought to the attention of some council members, also from applicants, is regarding the gas company. The gas company, like many utilities, they have a large backlog of people that they need to serve. So one of the complaints that we get and that we heard from the focus group also was, from the time that we tell the gas company the gas can be turned on, there's often a delay before they actually come and do it. So although we've said it's okay and we've issued the certificate of occupancy, they can't move into their house because they don't have gas. The reason that we do that, as I indicated with the C of O, is because that's really the only leverage that we have as a city to prevent illegal occupancy. Once we turn the gas on, the people move in, and that's it. We've lost control over the situation. So that's the one thing that we can hold to maintain control of the situation. And the focus group said, we get it, we understand that's why you do it. We don't like it, but we totally understand that's why you do it. So that was where they came from on that. So to wrap everything up, I just wanted to give kind of an overview. These are the statistics from last year. I think our statistics for this year are probably pretty similar, maybe a little bit lower this year. So in 2017, for the development review process, the planning staff processed 500 applications, which included 25 public hearings with the Planning Commission and with the director. Most of those were Planning Commission hearings. In the plan check and permit process, we issued 1,951 permits. So that includes building, plumbing, electrical, mechanical, all of those different permits combined, close to 2,000 permits. And then on the last part, the construction and inspection part of the process, we inspected and finalized close to 1,600 permits. So the 300 that are missing there are just the more simple permits that may not require inspections. And then that included the construction of 92 new dwelling units in the city. So that concludes my presentation, and I'm happy to answer any questions. As you've seen, we also have Scott and Dennis and Isla in the audience who are happy to answer any questions that I can't. Thank you.
Do we have any council questions at this time?
I want to go back to the gas, holding gas.
Sure.
It's a problem because I went through them myself when I was building my house. Are there any cities that don't do that? Or municipalities? Or they hold
Dennis would know that better than I would.
Electrical instead? I mean, this is a problem because, every day it costs the resident, the customer money.
Yes.
I know the reason, but, people, because you don't want people to move in it illegally, but isn't there ways to chase people out?
Typically,
because
typically the cities I've worked in surrounding cities, hold one of the two utilities, either either the electricity or the gas. We find that allowing them to have electricity allows the contractor to do a more safe inspection of the house, so they can ring the house out, make sure that the electrical system is actually working before we actually final the permit. The gas system is tested with air, so they don't need the gas meter to test that system.
I think at county we hold the electricity, yeah.
Yes, it's typically one or the other.
Yeah. But I thought the Edison is a little faster than the gas company.
I haven't heard that.
Yeah.
We can look into it if that's something we want to do, speed up the process. Sure.
Yeah, maybe we should check this, how do we streamline that, yeah.
Sure.
Michael, I have a question. When you say delayed, what are you talking about? 2 days, 3 days, a week, as far as gas company?
I think up to a week.
Just on the
maybe,
average,
I don't know.
I'm just,
I would say on average, from what I've heard, it's about 4 days. It really
okay.
depends on, a lot of times, the customer side. So if the customer, we send the release, it's typically an email, and the customer has to set up an account as well. And if they aren't vigilant in calling the gas company to make sure that they're on schedule to get the meter, sometimes there's a delay in there, so.
okay. All right, thank you.
Yeah, getting a meter is a bit of a chore.
It
Okay.
is, yeah.
Is there any other questions at this time?
Are you going to want to take questions regarding the suggestions from the focus group at this point, or is that for later?
Sure.
I just had a couple of them, a couple of things I just want to clarify. On the focus group memorandum on page 3, under planning questions, there was a comment or a bullet point, they don't like the upcoming changes to the incentive program. What are they talking about there? Do you know what that's referring to?
Yes, we are, as part of the zoning code update that staff is working on right now, we are going to be proposing some changes to the incentive system. We've found
Incentive for what?
the incentive. I'm sorry, in the single family in the R1 zone, you can increase your floor area ratio. The normal cap for house size is 3,500 square feet. There's a series of bonuses that you can get up to a maximum of 4,000 square feet if you do certain things. What we found is that generally people are taking advantage of the same ones on all of the projects, and it's either to the point where we think it's either just good practice to include these things anyway, or people are taking advantage of loopholes that we'd rather get rid of. So we're proposing, and we'll discuss it more fully with the council when we bring that back to you, but we're proposing to basically get rid of the bonuses that we have now and replace them with new ones. Some of our developers have been given a preview of that through the zoning code update process, and they're not satisfied with it because they've got their rhythm down with the system we have in place now, and they know they can punch out plans that meet those requirements, so they just don't want them changed.
So that's something that's going back to us?
It'll come back to you, yes.
Okay, and then another question was, comment was made, Temple City is too sensitive to resident complaints. What does that mean?
Was there? I don't know. No, I think the point of it was that, and I don't know if there were specific situations that were mentioned, but I think the point was that if there were, I don't know a specific example, so I'll just use the example
maybe I'll go on. It says, Temple City is too sensitive to resident complaints. One bad experience ruins it for everyone else. Arguments about patio sizes, window heights, and second stories. Strange requests that come out of nowhere. I don't know what is all that?
I think that the origin of that comment, I think, is, for example, with two-story homes, we get complaints from some residents about privacy concerns and their neighbors looking into their backyard and things like that. So I think their point was, what we build 100 houses a year, and one resident complains about the second story, and now you go and change the requirements based on the concerns of that one resident.
Oh, okay.
But usually it's the resident is usually, maybe we only hear one or two complaints, but it's usually an issue that we're already aware of or that makes sense. I don't know. Do you want to add anything to that? Okay.
I guess another way of saying we're too sensitive is that we bother to listen at least, right?
Right.
I mean, we're not just...
One person's responsiveness is another person's sensitive.
Okay.
They're probably saying two sets of neighbors' complaints, right? Not talking about their own complaints.
Right. That's all. Thank you.
Do you have any other questions at this time? I'll just ask one quick one. Actually, Councilmember Chavez asked. I was asking about the incentive program too. There was one comment for the focus group. Let's see. Oh, there was something about the building counter hours shutting down if someone goes on lunch. I guess this is less of a question, but more of a comment. That's actually a complaint that I've gotten from residents before. So I just thought it was interesting that it came out of this focus group because it's the exact same thing we hear sometimes.
Yeah, it appears there's no backup person.
Yeah. So it just kind of you show up, and then some people say, well, I sit around, wait for someone, and I don't know when they're going to be back, and it's not really clear what time they should show up. If they don't know when the person might take lunch or what lunch hours are.
It is an issue that we're aware of.
Yeah. So although I generally agree that you said there's not a lot of big glaring red flag issues that I think overall we are doing a pretty good job, and I think sometimes we just hear maybe I like to think of them as outlier issues that come to us occasionally. But I just want to comment that that's one issue that is a bit more it's not an isolated, like,
Right.
incident that we've
So
got.
do we only have one person that can deal with the building permit?
We have, generally, yes, Sylvia is her title is building and housing assistant, but she's the permit technician, basically. We were in the process of cross-training another staff person to serve as a backup for her, and then unfortunately, we've now promoted that person into another position where she's no longer in a place where she can cross-train right now. So we are aware that it's an issue, and we're taking steps to address it. Hopefully, once we get back to full staffing, we'll have an opportunity to start cross-training again and have someone as a backup to Sylvia.
Because that issue has come to us before, not on this level necessarily, but from a larger standpoint, that good governance would say that you should have a backup pretty much in every area. And I know we've talked about that amongst the council and in some of our sessions we've had, that's certainly a goal. And I understand there are dynamics and costs and things like that, but it sounds like you guys are aware of it, and hopefully we'll address that as soon as.
Yes.
But one takeaway for me, and just the last thing, is that the focus group, I think it was clear that staff, for the most part, does a very good job with the limitations that we have and things that we do. So I think that should be pointed out too, and that should be commended and pass that along to all of the staff. That in reading this, it gave me a good sense that for the most part we're taking care of the major issues that we have to deal with. So.
Thank you.
Great. All right, thank you. So at this time, I'd like to open public comment. Is there anyone who would like to address the council on this issue? Okay. Oh, okay, Mr. John Cordes.
Yeah, this is a bonus. I didn't realize I was going to get into this, but I do have some comments. Interestingly enough, my background is when I was gainfully employed, actually, was working with IT and with systems design. So my focus as you're going through the workflow is how much automation is there in this process? It seems like it's very much face-to-face time. Is there automation in it where you can track all of these kind of, such as the timing of it, when something is done, or is it all a manual operation?
No, we do have permit tracking software that we have access to in the office. TransTech has access to in their office, and we very closely track when plans come in, when they go out, when they come back. So yes, we are on top of all of that, and we're working now on. We've started implementing electronic plan submittal on both the planning side and the building side, so that rather than coming in with rolls of plans, you can just click and send a PDF of the plans to us, and we in TransTech can review it electronically. So
Use CAD/CAM and some of the.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Good. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to make a comment? Oh, Ms. Lucy Liu.
Sorry, I was debating. With regards to the bonus density incentive, I remember that discussion during the Planning Commission review of each segment of the zoning code update. And I have to say, I do agree, I support that idea. I know people don't like changes. Yes, they have their ways already set out, but I think that review, all in all, closes some loopholes, and in the long run, it should serve our community better. So I hope when it is brought to the city council that it doesn't get knocked down because we are a very cozy town. There are some houses, unfortunately, that are being built that are, in my opinion, kind of too big, maybe overly utilizing those bonus density incentives. So hopefully sealing the loopholes will bring those houses back to a more fitting look for our little city. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Any other public comments?
I think.
Frank Riddell? No, you come on up.
I just want to ask a question on follow-up. I had a family that moved in behind us that was living in one of those cord-to-cord-to-cord type issues that you mentioned. And then I turned that into having it checked out. Do we have method that we keep on checking those areas out to be sure that they don't get repeated? You understand what I'm saying? There were
Explain
two kids that were living behind us without supervision, and they were living, well, they had their own supervision, but they were living in a,
Garage?
tenant had done sublet the back part of the
House?
Mayor Mann, I wouldn't want to speak to a specific code enforcement case in this, but I can have, Mr. Forbes can talk generically about how we would approach.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, once we become aware of a situation like that, we will diligently, do what we need to do, working with the property owner to take care of it and get rid of it. And then we will, if something's happening in the garage behind a house, we can't always monitor that from driving by on the street. So we do rely on neighbors to keep us informed of things. But if it's something that's visible from the street, then we will occasionally, drive by again and just check up and make sure that things are still doing what they need to do.
Is that reported back to the neighbors then? Like by myself? Is it back to the property owner? Is it reporting it?
Typically not. If a complainant calls in a specific case, sometimes if they request to be kept informed of the status of that case, we will do that. But then once that initial case is resolved and closed, we won't necessarily, keep in contact with them. You can always call in and check up with us, check in with us, but we don't really have a mechanism for sharing that information regularly.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? All right, seeing none, I will close public comment. Moving on to council discussion. Maybe perhaps Councilmember Yu, do you have any comments you'd like to make on this item?
No, I appreciate the staff that actually reach out to our builders and the building community to solicit input. And I must say that our plan check process is indeed fast. I mean, I experienced firsthand, and compared to what we do at the county, I mean, actually, we're doing pretty well. And I also can personally attest to the almost next day. I think every time I called, it's actually next day, the inspection.
Well, if you called, it was probably in the
No, it wasn't. Not me calling. It was my contractor calling.
Oh,
I mean,
okay.
I'm just saying me, just to represent. So yeah, I think the process works out pretty well. The only hiccup was with the gas thing, but so we'll look into that and see when we can improve that. But the plan check process is indeed very fast, and I appreciate what you guys have done.
Yeah, thank you. Mayor Pro Tem?
Well, I'd just like to say thank you, Michael, staff, TransTech. I think this is a very informative report, and I think it's good for our residents to know that it's not easy and that there is a process and that there are certain reasons why things are done in a certain way, and it usually has to do with safety. That's, I think, one of our top priorities with planning and building. So, yeah, I'm very happy. Thank you. And I think Temple City, I think we do an outstanding job. I thank you. I appreciate you taking the time to do the comparisons with the other cities. I think that's also very helpful. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Sternquist?
Just a shout out for the PowerPoint and this staff report. It was very thorough, and I too, Councilmember, you had the opportunity to build a house in Temple City, and mine was, 35 years ago, and I remember the process so well. But actually, I always thought that we did a great job, because from the time I submitted my plans and moved in my house, it was less than 7 months.
Good for you.
So, yeah, I've had a great personal experience, and it seems like things are still similar. I'm sure they've been tweaked somewhat, but had nothing but great things when I did mine a long time ago. And it was one of the first 2 stories in Temple City, especially on my block in that area. So.
All right. Thank you. Councilmember Chavez?
Nothing further. Thank you.
All right, thank you. So, yeah, again, I'd like to also thank staff as well as TransTech for overall an excellent service that you are providing to all the residents and constituents of Temple City. But I thought it was a very informative presentation. You outlined basically step by step how it's carried through. I think really the only comment I would have at this point is maybe sort of ancillary to the step-by-step process and has more to do with maybe a bit more subjective, maybe more of a kind of customer service philosophy, I guess, for lack of a better word. Being somewhat of a plan checker myself on the county side, I can understand how difficult sometimes it could be. That you're dealing with a broad variety of customers with different levels of expertise, from those who have almost zero knowledge of the process to those who know it like the back of their hand. So, and dealing with the plan check process for each kind of customer is also just as diverse. However, in sort of my own personal experience on the plan check process is we've always sort of adopted this idea of trying to figure out how we can help the customers that are maybe the least knowledgeable. And sometimes that could be very, very challenging because occasionally you get someone who doesn't want to work with you at all. And those are the toughest ones. And that's why I asked about the checklist, is because the checklist doesn't benefit the person who's already knows the process because they don't need it. But it helps someone who's maybe going through the process the first time and needs some sort of like a roadmap. I always like thinking of our review processes as a roadmap to approval. Too often, government is viewed as sort of like an obstacle. We're just bureaucrats sitting behind a counter preventing you from building what you want to build. So I always want us to move towards sort of this idea that we are providing a roadmap to approval. We're not providing obstacles to your goal. And I think you outline, Mr. Forbes, you outlining everything makes it very clear that that's central to sort of our philosophy. And I would encourage us to maintain and maybe even improve that as much as we can. And sort of central to that is also clarity of comments. I know, like, sometimes you can make a certain comment about a certain change many different ways. You can be very general and vague about certain revisions, or you can be very specific and say revise X, Y, Z, but then you can't be a designer, like you said. You can't cross that boundary and become the designer for the applicant. So just sort of my general comment is, as long as we're not getting any complaints about clarity of direction, again, roadmap to approval, as long as they're aware that they know they need to do these things in order to get to a certain point. And the last thing I want to hit on is another common thing that I get contacted about is related to sort of the language barrier that we deal with often in the city. I don't know if we have a very good solution to that. I know we have at least one planner who speaks Mandarin Chinese, I believe. So I think that's a great benefit to us. Like, for example, I'll just use one case. I know it might not be representative of the type of customer service that we get, but I think sometimes for folks who do not speak English well, they feel like they have a difficult time even just understanding the checklist. So maybe that's something I would maybe encourage staff to maybe think about. Is there a better way we can assist customers who may have that sort of problem or that challenge, and see what we can do? And I know we all know what sort of our current demographics are. And I even noticed that when you listed the names of all the participants of the focus group, all of them have Chinese-sounding last names. So I would imagine a good number of them also may speak English as a second language as well. So I think that's important for us as a city to try to.
Yeah, one time we used to have interpreters that worked through I know they worked through the Parks and Rec, but I remember giving out awards to Do we still have those on
Volunteers?
staff, volunteers?
Volunteer interpreters, no.
We don't have any volunteer interpreters anymore.
We have our staff, we have several staff members who do speak multiple languages that they're, through our bargaining unit agreements, have a certain amount of incentive to, are provided an incentive to do that as well.
So, based on what Mayor Mann is saying, then is it an issue?
It is a challenge. It is a challenge because.
What does that mean? Does that mean we are doing it or we're not doing it?
We have a staff person on the planning side who assists with that. It's a challenge we deal with, so that if that individual staff person is not there at that time, then we try our best. And I've seen staff many times, use Google Translate and kind of clumsily, but to the best of their ability, try to convey as much as we can. But it's something we need to improve upon as well, as the mayor's pointing out, and we need to try to explore what other ways we can try to improve.
And of course, the applicants are free to bring in their own interpreter, I'm assuming.
Sometimes that happens. Sometimes that happens as well at the counter, and that has its own challenges, even in of itself, because you're conveying sometimes very technical, not commonly expressed terms or colloquialisms, or even technical for lack of a better, technical aspects of what we're trying to look for with our planning and building processes. So it is a challenge that we continue to try, and I know staff continues to try to address.
Yeah, and I know like the county, I believe recently, I don't know if it's a pilot program or something, and I think there are a number of companies that offer some sort of on-call translation services, and they were trying to do a demo for us because part of my group does plan check. I'll admit it's very clumsy.
I bet.
They have a phone with 2 receivers, and you have the person speaking on one end, you have staff speaking on one end, and then you have an interpreter who's off-site speaking on another end.
Oh, what a nightmare.
And I was looking at that, I'm going, well, that works in the demo, but I have a hard time thinking that that's going to work that smoothly in practice. So that's why I never really brought that up and said, hey, Brian, can you look into that? Because it just didn't seem like something that would work very well. But having said that, if there are no further comments,
Mr. Mayor, may I
yeah.
just add
Yes.
just one additional
Yes,
comment?
please.
Because not everyone in the audience or in front of the TV can have read the comments. So I am actually very impressed in that these comments actually mention names of our staff, and virtually every staff member's name were mentioned, being providing good service. So I want to point it out. Scott, Hesty, Sylvia, and also, our plant checkers, and so everybody under Mr. Forbes. And actually, one last shout out is to our Mr. Cook, because one of the comments said getting a meeting with the city manager is much easier than in other cities. So I want to actually give a shout out to our people as to how well.
Maybe he doesn't have enough to do, I don't know.
Don't go there.
So-
Thank you, Councilmember Yu. I'll take that compliment
Just one
and go with it.
Good. So I think we, like the mayor's saying, I mean, we've been doing a good job. Let's just continue, do an even better job in serving
always
our
look to improve.
constituents. So.
Yes, always.
all right. So for this, we don't really need a motion. We're just okay.
Motion to receive and file.
Receive and file.
All right, second that.
Okay. So we've received and filed this report if there are no objections, and we will move on to the second item: Chamber of Commerce lease and potential office relocation and site development.
Thank you, Mayor Mann, members of the council. Before you tonight is we're looking for action to give me authority to actually execute a month-to-month agreement with the Chamber of Commerce for the site that's right over there, where the Chamber of Commerce currently sits. That lease actually expired yesterday, but the provisions of the lease continue forward. Would like to continue with those conditions moving forward on a month-to-month basis. And the reason why we want to go month-to-month is because there has, over the last few months, been expressed by the City Council some desire to look at a potential reuse of that site and actually move the Chamber of Commerce to the Civic Center. We did use Mr. Goodell, David Goodell, who you saw at your last council meeting, to take a look at the Civic Center site, in particular, what's right behind us, to see if they could actually site and have the Chamber of Commerce use that some portion of this part of the building to for the Chamber of Commerce to relocate potentially in the future. That is a possibility. Mr. Goodell actually visited the site. The current site of the Chamber of Commerce looked here, had some recommendations, but it can be cited here in terms of its existing use, square footage, and functionality. And in fact, there's probably a little bit better functionality. I actually walked through the building also with Mr. Choi a few weeks ago, and preliminarily, there's the functionality could work. The other or what we've heard expressed by the council too, is some reuse. So tonight, if the action we're desiring is first give me the authorization to execute a month-to-month agreement for the existing site. Continue with beyond the preliminary space planning concepts, or just basic space planning for siting the Chamber of Commerce office here, and then further direction. But to give you a little bit of background, to give you a sense of the site itself, it is, I'm going to use the word, an awkward site for a couple of reasons. One, currently how it's sited, there is ingress and egress on the northern part of Las Tunas there. But if you look down at Lydale, as we looked at the site again, the ingress and egress is a little bit tougher because the alleyway is split, has split ownership between the city and private property on the south side. There's a consolidation there would need to be a consolidation of the site. The site is about a half acre. When Mr. Forbes when Mr. Forbes was talking to some folks at the International Shopping Center conference, looking at the site from an economic development standpoint, which we can look further if the council would like us to, but one of the ideas that popped in our head was maybe a drive-through Starbucks or those kind of things. For sites, for drive-throughs, 30,000 square feet to 25,000 square feet is what most drive-throughs are looking for, even though the size of the physical store is not very large. The drive-through and the way the drive-through has to work and the ingress and egress actually requires a certain amount of square footage. That's why you're seeing, for example, near the Home Depot in Albany, how large a space that Starbucks took. There's a Starbucks on north of Longden on Rosemead as well. That site is a bit larger than this site as well to accommodate.
You mean Duarte and Rosemead.
Excuse me, thank you, Duarte and Rosemead.
So you're just talking about the physical space around it?
The physical space around it, and how it has to be somewhat contoured. But we could still use that, but that's just a preliminary look at what we saw. We can also employ a economic development consultant to assist us in looking at that site commercially as well. So very simply tonight, we're looking for your direction, if it's okay for me to enter into additional month-to-month lease, and if you want us to take a look at the chamber moving over here, and then second, if there's a desire to explore a potential reuse of the property without getting too far ahead and expending any additional funds for either professional services or whatnot, if this is something of a desire of the council. Because again, we've heard it individually through probably the last 6 months or so, but we haven't brought it to you and said, okay, maybe if you could give us some general direction, that would be helpful.
Question?
I'm assuming that the chamber did not exercise their right to the 2-year extension provided in the original lease?
No.
No. Okay. Because it was an option for a 2-year extension. All right.
Any questions?
No, I'm excited. I'll make a motion. Yeah,
Well,
I'll second.
we have to let us do the public comment first.
Oh, right.
All right, so I will open up public comment. Is there anyone who'd like to address the council on this issue? I see Mr. Steve Stafford getting up. Okay.
I don't know.
Mayor Mann, Mayor Pro Tem Fish, council members, city staff. I'd like to see like a small shopping center there and not have a restaurant with a drive-through there. The drive-through could impact Lyledale the way that's set up there. I've been there many times and it's,
Will that be like mini shops then, or?
could be a, it could be a mini shopping center. You know, something of a small shopping center.
Very small.
You know, it'd have to be something that would work there and be feasible. You know, maybe like a bank, something in the way that there'll be enough parking, that'll work. I think a drive-through type restaurant there might be a problem with the egress there on Lyledale. Because they're gonna have to come in one way and come out, and that's gonna start to conflict with going over, you know, with Lyledale. I like the idea of moving the chamber here to City Hall. It's more centrally located. I think that we gotta find something that'll fit there. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Stafford. Is there anyone else who'd like to comment at this time? Okay. All right, Mr. John Cordes.
I know there's been a lot of talk about park space, and so my thoughts go to Pocket Park. Is that even a possibility in this spot?
Anything's possible.
You know, in addition to that, because
Yeah,
you've got
exactly.
along, what is it, Encinitas? You've got R2, you've got apartments and a lot more population in there. And
More
with
densely
the-
populated.
What's being proposed for across the street on Rosemead with the new master plan, potential for a lot more residential units in there. So my thoughts go to Pocket Park if somehow it can be, you know, squeezed in.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else would like to comment? Yes. Miss Lucy
Like we're
Lee.
taking numbers.
you guys.
I love his idea of the pocket park. Speaking of which, I believe someone told me at the last city council meeting, the lot behind Primrose was approved for a park. Thank you so much. Thank you very much. So yeah, pocket park here would be wonderful too. Thanks.
Thank you. Anyone else? Make it 3 in a row right there? No, I'm just
Jerry?
kidding, Jerry.
Come on, Jerry.
All right,
Jerry
so.
doesn't want to park next door to his place. Do you? No.
All right. Oh, okay. See,
Oh
there-
my
there you go.
goodness, okay.
3 in a row. Yeah.
Jerry Jambasian, 9136 Las Tunas. I'm about 500 feet from the chamber building. In speaking with John Petrillo, I know that he's possibly getting ready to retire and sell, but wondering if possibly it could be developed along with his property there at Mama Petrillo's and the apartments that are in the back there, and turning it into a larger project. So it's just a thought.
Oh, okay.
Thank you, Jerry.
Thank you, Jerry. All right. Is there any more public comments? We're 4 in a row. All right. So I'll close public comment. Additional council comments? Councilmember Chavez?
No.
Councilmember Sternquist? Councilmember Yu? Just going down the line. Mayor Pro Tem?
No,
Nothing?
I
I'm excited
concur
about
with
it.
the suggestion.
Okay.
But I also, yeah, I would like to, well, maybe with the information that Jerry has provided, maybe we should kind of look into that if they indeed have, you know, well, what's available. Because, you know, I agree with a lot of the suggestions. If it's standing alone with the size of the property is really not good for retail or restaurants. Probably pocket park is probably the best use of that, in my mind. However, if we could package that with some other properties, maybe we can do something meaningful. So.
Jerry? And I hate to ask you, yeah, can I ask you a question?
Yes, Council.
Does John Petrillo own that property?
Yes, he does. And I don't think he's desirous of selling the restaurant and having the name associated with it. So I think that, I don't want to speak for him, but I think that in
Okay.
talking with him, I think he just wants to sell everything and possibly move on, since he doesn't own or operate the place in Laverne anymore. And he's closed up 2 days, shortened his hours. He just, getting a little older, doesn't want to work as much.
Okay,
Okay?
thank you.
All right, so if there's no further council comments, do we have a motion for this item?
Make a motion to approve the month-to-month, is it a lease?
So,
Month-to-month lease with the chamber, and then to give direction to the city manager to explore uses for that space. Was there something else?
You can say recommendations 1 and 2.
Okay, and recommendations 1 and 2.
okay.
A second?
All right, we have a motion and a second. Can we have a roll call, please, for that motion?
Councilmember Chavez?
Where's recommendations 1 and 2? Is that-
Recommendation 1 is to authorize the city manager to,
There's 3.
I don't have them
three.
numbered.
Yeah, 3 in the staff report.
Okay. Oh,
what's in the first page, yeah.
and your motion was again to do what?
Those things listed.
All 3?
1, 2,
Well, I
and
guess
3.
I heard 1, and then you said 2 and 3 also, right?
Yes.
Okay. Yes.
Councilmember Sternquist?
Yes.
Councilmember Yu?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Fish?
Yes.
Mayor Mann?
Yes. So the motion carries 5-0. And so we have, looking forward to
Excited. It's very
what we
exciting.
could do with that space. So
Very exciting.
Thanks to Peter and the chamber for
Thank you, Peter.
being at work, working with us as well.
yes, thank you, Peter, for staying till the end. All right. So moving on, we have an update from our city manager.
Couple items to discuss really quickly, considering the time. Lights on Temple City, starting at 5 o'clock. Parade at 7, down its normal course. Along with that, we're doing a letters with Santa, letters to Santa, excuse me, which will have a booth. We'll have some activity at Lights on Temple City as well. Letters are starting to come in already. Holiday home contest is going on. Will be going on. We will be going out. Judges will be canvassing the city starting Monday, the 10th.
Who are
And
the judges?
Commissioners,
commissioners.
Parks and Rec.
Parks and Rec Commissioner?
Parks and Rec Commissioner and staff. So there's a few out already. Winners will be notified September 17th to the 21st. 2 other quick updates on the ring program. There's been a lot of incentives out there, holiday incentives, so we're going to be waiting till January actually to do the ring program.
Yeah.
So that
There is.
there's just too many incentives going
There's a
on right
lot.
now as we were looking, so.
Costco. and-
Every,
Yeah.
and
Oh, yeah.
I saw one at Sam's Club at lunch today.
There's one on there,
Yes, I eat lunch at Sam's Club sometime for lunch.
The salad, right?
Yeah, no, I
It's a hot
don't.
dog and a drink.
Salad, yeah.
$1.50.
And then a little bit of back and forth with Lyft. They've been doing a lot of stuff, but we will have a better update for you hopefully by the end of the year, if not the first part of January. That's it for very quickly, sir.
Great. Thank you. Update from our city attorney.
Keep it brief as well. You may remember that in 2017, the legislature adopted a package of 15 new housing laws. In total, in 2018, there have been 16 pieces of legislation dealing with housing, all of which come on board as of January 1. Some of them are area-specific and won't apply to us, but it's worth noting that Governor Newsom, when he takes office, has described self-described his goal of 3.5 million new housing units in California by 2025 as, and I quote, audacious. So we can, I think, expect more new housing bills to come down as we go. Some of them are fairly innocuous. One will, as of January 1, grant an eligible developer that includes some affordable units a floor area ratio bonus in lieu of a dwellings per unit bonus. So they can make each unit slightly bigger or build, rather than a density bonus on a piece of property, just have larger units and thereby recoup the loss that they're going to take on their affordable units. Some of the other bills, well, let's just not get into them tonight because it's been a long night. But we will be working with your planning staff on those, and we'll see what the legislature brings us in 2019.
Great, thank you. Next, we have council reports on ad hoc or standing committee meetings. Do we have any tonight?
I don't have any reports, but I do have a question, and that is where we stand with the school district and the standing committee.
You've been asking that for some
Well, I
time.
haven't getting any answers. That's why I keep asking until we get a date. The last time I heard, they were gonna have an election, and they wanted to put it off till then. They had their election, and I still haven't heard anything. So I'm assuming we're attempting to do that.
Yes.
Do we have any
We'll get an
idea? I'm assuming it's not gonna be in December.
looks like it will be in January. Hopefully, I will have a date for you soon.
Okay,
Thank you.
so there's no other reports? Okay. Council items separate from the agenda, Councilmember Sternquist.
Just a couple of things. I want to share how grateful I am that we are going to move forward with looking at the chamber property, and I'm so
excited.
grateful that we had that study session on the chamber, and I feel like we just inherited this prime property, even though we've always owned it. So I'm looking forward to seeing what we can do with that. Councilmember Mayor Pro Tem Fish and I attended Catherine Barger's homelessness tour this past Friday, and we went out to a wonderful site in North Pasadena that you wouldn't even know really existed and was a permanent housing site for homeless families. And then they also took us to a tour back to the Veterans Mercy Housing that I think many of us had already seen in El Monte again. But they had a panel discussion. It was somewhat informative. I don't believe there was any new information other than cities just really need to take a good look in their own cities and educate the public on the possibilities that are out there and how to partner with your community to get the best results. But nothing really, I don't think, new.
What was your impression of when you went to these sites? Did you feel fear for your life or have any concerns for your safety?
No, actually.
In visiting these two sites?
The one that was in North Pasadena was butted up to Caltech.
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 Beautiful neighborhood.
Beautiful
Yes.
neighborhood. The families that are there, it was very interesting to meet some of the families. And Councilmember Mayor Pro Tem Fish was able to take a look at one of the apartments that were there. But a couple of the previous homeless family members were there to tell us, that now one of them is graduating from a 4-year university with, a job offer already intact, and she's able to take care of her daughter, and she can stay in that permanent housing facility until she either decides to move on or she's capable of supporting her daughter and herself. It's an absolutely beautiful development.
It's beautiful. And I didn't realize that with that particular one in South Pasadena, they specifically.
Wait, South Pasadena?
I'm sorry, Pasadena. They specifically earmarked it for homeless individuals that were disabled and had children. So there were,
It's very
yeah, and I
specific.
didn't know they could do that. But they did. So a lot of the people there were on, you know, on a very limited assisted, you know, assistance.
It's interesting that it's
So-
right next to PCC, because as you know, I teach at PCC, and I heard a kind of a disturbing stat the other day that one of every 5 students that attend community colleges
It's homeless.
are homeless.
We heard that too.
They
This
did-
one was- it was beautiful. You would,
They
you
did
would never,
mention that.
yeah, you would, walking up to it, like when we went on a bus, when they pulled up to the bus, I was looking for it. I mean, it was like, which one is it? It was like, oh, this
It's just
we're
beautiful.
parked right in front of it.
It doesn't even look
It's
like
beautiful.
apartments. It almost looks
Yeah.
like more a condominium
Gee,
project
what a novel idea, a nice homeless place in a nice area.
in a nice area.
Yeah.
It can
And
be
they-
done.
And they pay.
It can be
With
done.
with vouchers from the state. Her rent was $300 a month. And she said, I would never have had this opportunity. So it's very eye-opening to see what can be done when you have a developer that works closely with the city, and prior to anything, even, you know, a shovel to the ground, there has been so much education of the residents. They actually got the whole residents around there involved. This is what the plans are. These are the type of families that will be coming. It was just so well done. So there are ways to do it. And, you know, Catherine Barger came up and she made some introductory comments, and she said, you know, this is something that cities are going to have to step up to the plate. It can't just be no more, it's not in my backyard. Everybody's going to need to share in this problem.
In
So,
the solution.
and trying to find solutions. So anyway, I think there's a lot of smart people working on the issue. There just needs to be a lot more collaboration with the different entities, including our faith-based ones, because they tend to now want to take the lead, and oftentimes the faith-based organizations aren't working in unison with the cities. So that's when the problems arise. But I think there's hope in the future for it.
Good.
And that's about it.
Thank you. Councilmember Yu?
I have nothing to add. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Chavez?
Nothing further, thank you.
Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem Fish?
Just a couple of things. Just wanted to remind everybody that the chamber is collecting toys, and that they can be dropped off during regular chamber hours until December 17th. I know we mentioned it earlier. And also that our Temple Sheriff Station is also collecting toys. They were collecting them today, but they'll be collecting them tomorrow from noon to 5 at the Walmart on Walnut Grove.
Can you take
So-
me to the sheriff's station also?
You know what, the flyer didn't, it said just, can you? Okay, good. Well, then you can take them to the station. So, yeah, if people are out there Christmas shopping and want to pick up a few extra things, I think it would be a wonderful cause. And looking forward to the parade.
And Women's Club, don't forget.
Oh, and Women's Club, third annual Christmas party is this Saturday. If anybody would like tickets, let me know.
Great.
That's it.
Okay, thank you. I don't think I shared this at the last meeting because that meeting ran really long. But I think one of the Fridays previous to our last meeting, we had a group of students from Temple City High School's ELD program come by for a tour of City Hall. I think ELD stands for English
Language
Thank you. I always forget that acronym. And it's Teresa Huang is the coordinator for that group. So she's been contacting me every year, roughly around the same time.
Nice.
She brings some of the students who they've recently immigrated to the U.S. and are going to Temple City High School. So a lot of them are still learning English, and so she always puts me up to the challenge to try to give a tour of City Hall in Mandarin.
Wow, that's
which
great.
is incredibly difficult for me. But it was fun. It was fun. We had some other students who are mentors as part of that ELD program that helped with the translation. And that day we were lucky to also have, we were speaking of Mandarin-speaking staff, we had Hesty at the public counter who talked a little bit about planning. which was kind of neat because I couldn't say any of the terms. Just like what Mr. Cook was alluding to, some of these things are difficult to translate. So that was very interesting. Their favorite part of the tour is here. So they love sitting up here, and they're like, oh, and then the gavel was here, so they all pretended to be. Yeah,
That's nice.
So and it's always good to have them here and be engaged, because I think part of the challenge of some of the new immigrants is understanding a different way of life, a different system of government.
It's huge.
There's
and I
no
think they,
democracy over there, I don't think.
yeah, it's just that the idea is just so different for them. So just to kind of have a really quick crash course of it, I think at least what Teresa tells me is they're all very appreciative of having that chance to learn. So but I always enjoyed having the ELD students over at City Hall. So anyway, also looking forward to Lights on Temple City, and so hopefully we'll see everyone there. And moving on to additional public comments, we do have a. Ooh,
Oh my goodness, everybody.
Wow, we're on a roll tonight.
Good evening again, Mayor and council members. I don't know if it was mentioned or not, I might have missed it, but compost giveaway, December 15th. I want to say 40,000 pounds of rich nutrient soil amendments
Get there early.
provided by the city and also Athens Services. So come on down with your pail or bucket and help yourself to it. 9 o'clock at the south end, I think, of Live Oak Park in the parking lot. And it's good stuff, and it helps your plants grow. Okay?
Great, thank you. Any additional comments?
I'm on
Uh-oh.
Lucy.
Ooh. All right, Ms. Lucy Liu.
Yes, and with all due respect, I don't mean to pick a fight, I just want to set some information straight. The facility that the council member Sternquist and Mayor Pro Tem Fish visited was for families with persons with disabilities. The Mercy Housing Project that was proposed from Golden Motel was nothing near that.
Oh, we know.
No. So we did ask them if there was a possibility for it to be specifically designated for families, for women, for people with disabilities. We were told no. It had to be for people who are single, formerly homeless, and by formerly homeless, they said they were going to take them off the streets for 2 months and rehabilitate them, and these had to be chronic substance abusers. So I just want to set the record straight that, it's not because, personally, at least for me, it wasn't because we didn't want to help the homeless, but the type of the project that was going into the Golden Motel was nothing like the one that you had visited. And they also talked about for veterans in this, but it was a small number of units designated for veterans. The majority of the units were going to go to single individuals who were chronically substance abusers that were only going to be off the streets for 2 months. So I don't think anybody who's been chronically abusing substances can be rehabilitated in 2 months. And that was the reason why, the community spoke out against the project. So I just wanted to set the record straight on that one.
And
Thank
I
you.
also wanted to say the facility in Pasadena was for 20 families.
We did.
So it's very small.
Yeah, this one is going to
Comparative,
be
yeah, it was 20
300
families,
plus.
which
Yeah.
comparative, I mean, you can't compare that to Mercy
I think
Housing.
they also
I mean, you
went to
just
the Mercy
can't.
Housing in El
In Imani, which
Yeah,
is
but that's veterans.
60-unit veterans, solely veterans.
Right, that's
The
100%.
Golden Motel
Yeah.
was 300 plus. With
Exactly.
a very small number.
Look,
You
my
can't
comments were
compare
not
them.
intended to revisit that. I'm just saying that there are instances where
Yes.
there can be successful
Yes.
homeless
Absolutely.
housing. okay?
Absolutely, and I totally agree. I'm just saying, but we're comparing apples to oranges.
I'm not comparing anything to anything. I'm just saying there are instances where you can have successful. Obviously, the Mercy Housing, that's a done deal. There is no housing there.
Yes,
It
yes.
wasn't going to work there.
Yes.
But there are examples of
Other
where it does.
possibilities, yes.
That's all I was saying.
Okay, and I appreciate that. Thank you.
All right, thank you. All right, any more? All right, if not, I believe we can adjourn. Good night. Oh, yeah, I see that.